Good day, learners! Welcome back to my channel. This is me, Sir AJ, and welcome to Accounting by Sir AJ. For today, we will be talking about a basic accounting concept. Sabi nila, mahirap daw yung topic na to, pero I will try to make it understandable sa inyong lahat through this video. So, ang topic na to ay adjusting entries. So if you want to learn how to do adjusting entries, then this video is for you. So good day everyone. Today we will be talking about adjusting entries. So the first question that we need to answer is, why do we need to make adjusting entries? If you remember in your basic accounting, there is this concept we call the accrual basis, wherein we record the revenue when they are earned, not when they are collected, and we record expenses when they are incurred, not when they are paid. So we need to make adjusting entries so that revenues will be recorded in the period in which the services are performed and for expenses to be recognized in the period in which they are incurred. Because sometimes, iba yung period kung kailan mo sila pinerform at in-incur versus the period when they were collected or when they were paid. So there are two types of adjusting entries. We have the deferrals and then we have the accruals. So under deferrals, we have two subtypes which are the prepaid expenses and the unearned revenues. For the accruals, we have accrued revenues and accrued expenses. So we will be talking all of this isa-isa in this video. So we will start with deferrals. So for deferrals, these are expenses or revenues that are recognized at a date later than the point when cash was originally exchanged. In layman's term, nauna ang cash collection for revenues at cash payments for expenses. Cash were already paid. Pero yung revenue ay i-earn pa lang in the future at yung expenses ay i-incur pa lang in the future. If a company does not make an adjustment for these deferrals, the asset and liability are overstated and the related expense and revenue are understated. So let's try to look at the first type of deferral, which is the prepaid expenses. From the word itself, prepaid, paid in advance. So these are assets paid for and recorded before a company uses them. So binayaran mo na siya in advance bago mo pa magamit yung expenses. So for prepaid expenses, these are costs that expire either with the passage of time, halimbawa yung mga rent and insurance, or through use and consumption, for example, mga supplies. So for prepaid expenses, there are two methods that we use. We have the asset method and we have the expense method. Under the asset method, the moment you pay for the expense, the company debits an asset account to show the service or benefit it will receive in the future. Under the expense method, a company debits, nung pagkabayad mo, a company debits an expense account to show the service or benefit it will receive in the future. So, let's have an example to apply these two methods. Example, Lancelot Company purchased supplies costing 25,000 on January 5, 2020. An inventory count at the close of business on December 31 reveals that 10,000 supplies are on hand. So let's try to solve this example using the two methods. So first is para sa asset method. So kapag asset method, on January 5, you record the whole amount as an asset. Kaya debit supplies, 25,000, and credit cash 25,000. Now, on December 31, as you're adjusting entry, tatanungin mo yung sarili mo, ilan na lang ba yung asset na meron ka? Or ilang supplies na lang ba ang meron ka? Accordingly, nung binilang mo yung supplies, 10,000 na lang yung natira. Therefore, from 25,000, kailangan natin siyang gawing 10,000 or babawasan natin ng 15,000. Bakit? Saan ba napunta yung 15? Naging expense. Kaya ang entry natin ay debit supplies expense 15,000 at credit supplies 15,000. If you make a T account of these journal entries, at December 31, yung supplies mo ay nag-debit ka ng 25,000 tapos nag-credit ka ng 15,000, ang matitira na lang sa supplies ay 10,000. While the supplies expense is 15,000. Under the expense method, on January 5, you record the whole amount first as an expense. Debit supplies expense, 25,000. Credit cash, 25,000. On December 31, ask yourself, magkano ba dapat ang expense? Or magkano ba yung ginamit na supplies? If on-hand mo ay 10,000, ibig sabihin, yung ginamit mo or yung expense mo ay 15,000. So yung 25,000 na supplies expense dapat maging 15,000. Kaya i-credit natin ang supplies expense ng 10,000 at i-debit natin yung supplies ng 10,000. Again, because ang supplies expense from 25 kailangan maging 15. So from 25, i-credit natin ang supplies expense ng 10,000 and debit supplies 10,000. If you make a T account out of these entries, yung supplies expense, debit of 25,000 tapos credit of 10,000, ang supplies expense ay 15,000 ang balance. While ang supplies, 10,000 pesos. So regardless kung anong method ang gagamitin mo, the same yung magiging balances ng supplies tsaka supplies expense. So let's have another example for prepaid expenses. So for example, on October 4, 2020, Ling Company paid 60,000 pesos for a 1-year fire insurance policy beginning October 1. Ling Company's calendar year ends on December 31. So using this example, under the asset method, on October 4, we record the whole 60,000 as an asset. Kaya debit, prepaid insurance, 60,000, credit cash, 60,000. On December 31, you ask yourself, ilan na lang ba ang prepaid insurance? Or ilan na lang ba yung hindi pa na-expire? If from October to December 31, that is 3 months. So October, November, December. 3 months na yung nag-expire out of the 12 months. Therefore, 9 months na lang ang natitira. Ibig sabihin, if you multiply 60,000 times 9/12, yung prepaid insurance mo dapat ay maging 45,000. So from 60,000 to 45, kailangan mong bawasan ang prepaid insurance ng 15,000 pesos. That's why our journal entry is debit insurance expense 15,000 and credit prepaid insurance 15,000 pesos. If you observe, if you make a T account out of this journal entries, the prepaid insurance will be 60,000 minus 15,000 or that would be 45,000. While the insurance expense is 15,000 and it represents yung 3 months na nag-expire na yung insurance. Kasi 60,000 times 3/12 is 15,000 pesos. For the expense method, on October 4, we record the whole amount first as insurance expense. Kaya debit insurance expense 60,000, and credit cash 60,000. Now, you ask your question on December 31. Magkano ba dapat ang expense? Ang expense, yung nag-expire na portion or yung 3 months over 12 months. Yung 3 months over 12 months is 15,000. So, paano mo gagawing 15,000 ang 60,000? Babawasan mo ng 45,000. That's why ang entry natin ay debit prepaid insurance 45,000 and credit insurance expense 45,000. By doing that, yung insurance expense magiging 15,000 while ang prepaid insurance ay 45,000 pesos. So again, whatever method you use, the same ang maging balances dapat ng mga accounts. Yung prepaid insurance, 45,000, while yung insurance expense, 15,000 pesos. So that's it for prepaid expenses. The second type of deferral is what we call the unearned revenue. For this one, companies receive cash before services are performed. Nauna na yung bayad ng mga customers bago mo pa ma-render yung service. A company now has a performance obligation or a liability. Meron kang utang sa customer, pero hindi pera yung utang mo. Yung utang mo ay performance of the service. Items like rent, magazine subscriptions, and customer deposits for future services may result in unearned revenues. So under this kind of deferral, there are also two methods. We have the liability method or the income method. Under the liability method, a company credits a liability account to show the services to be performed in the future. While in an income method, a company credits the whole amount as an income account or a revenue account to show the services to be performed in the future. So, we will show how to use these methods in an example. So for example, Natalia Company received 12,000 pesos on November 2 from Kufra Company for 3-month advertising services to be completed on January 31. Natalia Company's calendar year ends on December 31. So under the liability method, on November 2, you record everything first as a liability. That's why your entry is debit cash 12,000 and credit unearned revenue 12,000. The unearned revenue account is a liability account. On December 31, tanungin mo yung sarili mo. From November 2 to December 31, 2 months na yung nagdaan. 3 months yung service mo. So, ilan na lang yung utang mo na service? Yung utang mo na lang na service ay 1 month. Or, if you multiply 12,000 times 1 over 3, that is 4,000. So, yung unearned revenue from 12,000, kailangan natin gawing 4,000. Kaya babawasan natin siya ng 8,000 pesos. That's why ang entry natin ay debit unearned revenue 8,000 at credit service revenue 8,000. Yung service revenue, it represents the 2 months na na-perform mo na yung service. Kaya nga, revenue na siya. While sa income method, on November 2, you record everything first as a revenue. Kaya ang entry natin, debit cash 12,000 at credit service revenue 12,000. If you observe, the whole amount was recorded as revenue. Pero hindi yun tama kasi hindi mo pa na-perform lahat. That's why on December 31, you ask yourself, magkano ba dapat yung revenue lang? Yung revenue lang ay 2 months lang, November and December, or 8,000. Paano mo gagawing 8,000 yung 12,000 na una mong ni-record? Babawasan mo siya ng 4,000 pesos. That's why ang entry natin ay debit service revenue 4,000 at credit unearned revenue 4,000. If you make a T account, sa liability method, ang unearned revenue ay 12,000 minus 8,000, that is 4,000. Tapos ang service revenue ay 8,000. While dito naman sa income method, ang service revenue ay 12,000 minus 4,000 or 8,000. Then ang unearned revenue ay 4,000. Regardless of the method you use, same ang magiging balances ng mga accounts. So now we go to accruals. What are accruals? Companies make adjusting entries for accruals to record revenues for services performed and expenses incurred in the current accounting period. Cash is not yet paid for expenses and not yet received for revenues. So unlike deferrals, sa deferral, nauna yung cash. Pero sa accrual, na-perform mo na yung service pero hindi ka pa nababayaran, or nagamit at na-incur mo na yung expense pero hindi mo pa binabayaran. So there are two types of accruals. We have accrued revenue and accrued expense. We will first talk about accrued revenue. For accrued revenue, these are revenues for services performed but not yet recorded. They may also result from services that have been performed but not yet billed nor collected. So take note, importante na perform mo na yung service, may revenue ka na, pero hindi mo pa nako-collect. An adjusting entry records the receivable kasi wala ka pa ngang nare-receive na cash, that exists at the statement of financial position date, and the revenue for the services performed during the period. So, an example is, in December, Helkert Company performed services worth 25,000 that were not billed to clients on or before December 31. Because these services are not yet billed, they are not recorded. So nag-perform ka na daw ng services worth 25,000 pero hindi mo pa nababayaran. So your entry is, for December 31, debit accounts receivable 25,000 and credit service revenue 25,000. Ganun lang kadali. You just record the revenue and record corresponding receivable. Para naman sa accrued expenses, these are expenses incurred or ginamit but not yet paid or recorded. So hindi mo pa nababayaran. Examples are interest, mga rent, taxes, or salaries. Adjustments for accrued expenses record the obligations that exist at the statement of financial position date and recognize the expenses that apply to the current accounting period. Kung sa accrued revenue, i-record mo yung revenue at saka corresponding receivable, dito naman, you record the expense with a corresponding payable. So for example, Hayabusa Company signed a 3-month note payable in the amount of 50,000 pesos on December 1. The note requires interest at an annual rate of 12%. Yung nag-accrue dito is yung interest kasi from December 1 to December 31, nagdaan na yung 1 month. Pero hindi mo pa naman nababayaran yung interest kasi normally you pay it sabay kung kailan mo babayaran yung principal na 50,000. So, to record the expense, ang entry natin ay debit interest expense 500 at credit interest payable 500. How did we compute for 500? Ang computation po ay 50,000 yung principal times 12% annual rate times 1/12. Bakit 1/12? Kasi 1 month lang po yung nag-lapse, December 1 to December 31. When you compute that, the answer is 500. So that's it for this video. I hope na may natutunan kayo from this video. Now, it's your time naman to test your knowledge kung meron kayong natutunan from our discussion. So, we have 2 questions. If you know the answers to these questions, you may comment your answer sa video na to. Question number 1, if an entity uses the expense method of initial recording of expenses, the year-end adjusting entry involves A. Debiting a prepaid asset account for the expired portion of the advance payment made. B. Debiting an expense account for the expired portion of the advance payment made. C. Crediting an expense account for the unexpired portion of the advance payment made. Or D. Crediting a prepaid asset account for the unexpired portion of the advance payment made. Question number 2. Kaja Corporation received cash of 13,500 on September 1, 2020 for 1 year's rent in advance and recorded the transaction with a credit to unearned rent. The December 31, 2020 adjusting entry is A. Debit rent revenue and credit unearned rent 4,500. B. Debit rent revenue and credit unearned rent 9,000. C. Debit unearned rent and credit rent revenue 4,500. Or D. Debit cash and credit unearned rent 9,000. So again, if you know the answer, comment your answer sa video na to. So that would be all. Thank you so much, guys. If you have any questions, you may message me sa aking social media accounts. On Facebook, you may search for my profile. That's AJ Cresmundo. Sa Twitter, my username is @AJ Cresmundo. And dito sa YouTube, my channel is Sir AJ Cresmundo. So thank you very much. That would be all for today. And please remember that we are lifelong learners. We learn something new every day, and I hope that you learned something new today. So that would be all. See you sa next video. Bye!